Well, the call to prayer is being heard across Gaza City now, and you can see pictures there of one of the mosques that was bombed as a result of Israel's war on Gaza, the minaret destroyed, but faithful still gathering to pray. Welcome back. So as we've been explaining, Gaza lies in physical and psychological ruin. The cost of rebuilding is likely to run in the billions of dollars, according to UN and other organizations. At least 21,000 commercial, public, and private buildings have been damaged or leveled. That's almost 1,000 for every day the war lasted. More than 4,000 private homes were completely destroyed, and Arab leaders now have pledged $2 billion for reconstruction at a recent summit in Kuwait, but with no agreement on how to deliver the funds to the actual people of Gaza. Saudi Arabia took the lead, promising $1 billion in reconstruction money. And in 1996, the World Bank spent $15 million helping to construct government buildings. Those very same buildings have been the focus of Israel's attacks. Many of them are now just expensive rubble. Well, earlier in the day, I went out here in the city of Atatra to speak to people and see how they're beginning to rebuild their lives. Well, it's hard to imagine, but we're actually walking through the front door of what used to be someone's house. This used to be the foyer, and in fact, we're now walking into what used to be the kitchen. This over here used to be the bedroom, and you can see there are still electrical cables sticking out. So too are the pipes. The house has been completely destroyed for this family of 5, and in fact, they've been living on very modest and meager means since. And we're going to talk to one of these survivors here. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to start off by asking him really how life has become in the past few weeks for him. حابب أسألك كيف حياتك صارت يعني في خلال هالأسابيع؟
الأسابيع دي سودة زي ما أنت شايف، فيش لا دار لا أكل لا شرب ولا حاجة، قاعدين في هالخير.
Well, you can see he's telling me that life has become very dark, very bad for them. There's a family here living just on these meager means, a house made of cinder blocks and twigs. So certainly very difficult conditions. بدي أسألك إيش اللي بتتمناه هلا من المجتمع العالمي والدول اللي برا؟
نتمنى إنه يوقف العدوان والحرب اللي علينا هذه. ويرجعونا دورنا زي ما كانت وبلدنا زي ما كانت.
So I asked him, what does he want from the international community? What do they expect? And he said that he wants them to return their homes and rebuild their homes and provide them with shelters. But I'm going to ask him if he has really any confidence that that's going to happen. هل عندك أنت أي ثقة إن هذا فعلا ممكن يحصل؟
كل العالم غير بوقف مع إسرائيل. كل العالم. صح.
Well, there you heard it from them saying they don't have any confidence. In fact, most of the world, they believe, is standing with Israel on this, and certainly very troubling news. So for the Palestinian people, they're going to have to rebuild their lives for themselves as they have done for generations. And now they're going through the rubble of what used to be a neighborhood full of hundreds of families. Brick by brick, they're once again laying the foundations for their homes and trying just to survive and pick the pieces up to their shattered lives. Well, for more on the reconstruction efforts and what it's going to mean for the Palestinian people, we are joined by Sami Abdel Shafi, management consultant here in Gaza. Sami, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start off by asking you, when you look out and see this rubble, the economy nearly collapsed, where do the people of Gaza even begin to rebuild their lives?
I think with the fact that both the public sector and the private sectors have been annihilated, in addition to the private property, the public infrastructure is going to be very difficult to try to prioritize. But we need to put the political questions aside for a moment, so that people can go into the professional requirements of accurately assessing what needs to be done.
Now, we've heard already from the European Union saying reconstruction won't take place and there's internal political reconciliation. You're saying it's aid and reconstruction that has to come first. What is the most important thing for the people immediately right now to get going?
I think the most immediate component needs to be the assistance for those who have been displaced, the tens of thousands whose homes have been destroyed and severely damaged. Following that, very soon, we need to get on with the business of rebuilding the public infrastructure of the Gaza Strip, the public institutions. These are national assets that are very, very important to run the daily lives of civilians.
Now, are you at all concerned that the reconstruction effort may be politicized by everyone, including the international community, the U.S. and Israel?
Absolutely, that's one great threat. The international community seems to still be fixated on its old policies of boycott and siege, which contributed to the root causes of the catastrophe that just happened. What needs to be done is that politics needs to take a backseat to the human tragedy and to also take advantage of the single most truth that remains standing in Gaza, which is the resilience of its people. They aspire for the dignity as well as for lasting and comprehensive peace. They must be assisted so that they are able to go forward and to develop.
I want to broaden this out a little bit and just ask you, the Arab countries have pledged billions of dollars. In the past, we've seen this happen. We've seen the European Union. The money ultimately never trickles down to the people. How can it be done differently this time?
I think the money needs to be prioritized in a fashion that is earmarked for development as opposed to the handouts to people who are needy. We should not be creating or acquiescing to a welfare sort of distribution of funds. We should earmark all of the funds and implement them in a fashion that aids the development and the prosperity of Palestinians, especially that people of the Gaza Strip are fully capable to go forward with their lives if they are given a chance. But this chance will never come without an authentic and a credible, comprehensive political solution.
Sami, you've lived through very tough years in Gaza, including the siege and this war. Obviously, the tunnels played a very important lifeline to the Palestinian people, many of them now destroyed. How do you think the Palestinian people will recover, still under siege and still no outlet to the outside world?
I don't think they will recover. The only component they will keep is the resilience and the aspiration to go forward. But this in itself is a very important fact which ought to mandate some sort of a modified political approach to all of what's going on. We ought to start with politics, make sure there is resolution, and then the investments that will come afterwards will not be short-lived. Otherwise, if we politicize things too much, if we don't create a political solution, whatever investments made in the Gaza Strip or all of the Palestinian territories, for that matter, will end up being a sunk cost, and the Gaza Strip will only stand to face a new row of war and violence in just a few years to come. The truth is very clear, and it needs to be addressed.
Sami, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, as you've been hearing, there obviously very grim reality for the people of the Gaza Strip. And in fact, now we can cross over to our correspondent in Khan Yunis, Todd Baer, with more on that.
Well, doctors here at the main hospital in Khan Yunis say they are treating injuries that they have never seen before. We're talking about severe burns that penetrate the skin tissue all the way through to the bone. It has doctors asking exactly what kinds of weapons the Israeli forces used here. Meanwhile, in the last couple of days, I've had a chance to travel around this area to get a first-hand look at the massive damage caused to the southern part of the Gaza Strip.
Todd, you were talking about obviously some of the conditions there in the hospitals. Has the situation gotten any better for the doctors in recent days with an influx of humanitarian aid, as the Israeli military says?
Well, things have improved markedly, at least at this hospital in Khan Yunis. This is mainly a dropping off point, according to the doctors we've talked to. They've rushed patients in here. The most seriously injured, they've tried to get them out of here as quick as possible because they expect another influx of patients to come in, especially if the fighting picks up again. But it has gotten better. Still, there are lots of problems, lack of medicine, lack of doctors. There's still a major need for help and aid that is trying to come through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt.
Todd, I want to just go back briefly on some of these munitions. Obviously, we've heard some very serious allegations by international organizations. From what you're seeing there on the ground, do people there, or do they have a sense of optimism that anyone, particularly in Israel, is going to be held accountable for these types of munitions being dropped on what many are calling an illegal case?
Well, people don't have confidence that someone will be held accountable. I think we're referring to the use of white phosphorus, which has been described to me by experts as a legal munition in war, but only in open areas, used as a smokescreen against the enemy. Experts I've talked to are wondering why the Israeli forces would try to use white phosphorus in a densely populated area like Gaza. But to answer your question directly, people that I've talked to have no confidence at all that anyone would be held accountable if, in fact, a war crime was found to have taken place here.
Todd Baer, thank you very much, reporting live from Khan Yunis. Well, across the physical and geographic divide, our correspondent in the West Bank, Noor Oda, joins us. Noor.
Well, Ayman, Palestinians across their political divides and geographic divides imposed by the Israeli occupation have felt the pain and the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza as Israeli forces pounded that isolated strip for 20-odd days. And throughout that war, we've been talking about that sense of solidarity among Palestinians. To discuss that solidarity and why it's there despite all those differences and all those disconnections, geographic and otherwise, I'm joined by Dr. Rana Nashashibi, the director of the Palestine Counseling Center. Thank you so much, Dr. Rana, for joining us. I want to start by asking you, Palestinians and viewers rather across the world have been watching, and for some it may seem that Gazans are different, that they are a separate entity, if you will, and it's difficult to imagine why they consider themselves Palestinians, a part of the same people as those here in the West Bank or in occupied Jerusalem or indeed across the world. Tell us a little bit more about the Palestinian psyche, if you will.
We are all one people, definitely, and surely this separation that have taken place for such a long time with the Israelis blocking Gaza and putting it under siege have blocked our communication and our ability to access Gaza and to really be able to connect directly with our people and our relatives and our families in Gaza. Surely that in a certain way made it appear as if we are kind of living in two worlds or two situations. But that is definitely not the situation, because we are one family. If you look to many people who are, first of all, we are one people, because whether it's Gaza or it's the West Bank or Jerusalem, we are all occupied territories. We are all Palestinians. Also, Palestinians living in 1948 and Palestinians living in the diaspora, we are all Palestinians, one people. It's just that the occupation and this position that has been enforced on us have forced us to live in different places, but we are one people, one network and one society.
Living in different places geographically because of all these conditions, but also the world has been watching as Palestinians differ in their politics violently over the past 2 or 3 years. Now we have Gaza under the control of one of the factions and the West Bank under the control or the dominance of another, if you will. Tell me, what has this war done to Palestinians, to their psyche, to their sentiments of solidarity with one another, and why did we see such a heightened sense of frustration and even depression?
You know, even though that, it's always been the colonialist ideology to kind of separate and conquer or divide and conquer. You know, this is the colonialist ideology. So there was this kind of impression that people should feel like they are separated, and if they are divided, then we can rule them better. And this was the mentality, of course, of the British first, and then the Israelis took over. But definitely all through, and especially during this war on Gaza, this proved to be not true, because everybody came to the rescue of Gaza, came in solidarity to Gaza, whether we're talking about Ramallah, we're talking about Jerusalem, we're talking about Sakhnin in 1948, we're talking about al-Fahim, everywhere. All the Palestinian people felt that the attack on Gaza was an attack on them, and that the people who are suffering in Gaza could be them. And therefore, all of the people went in solidarity. Definitely, it varied from one place to the other as to the way that people expressed their anger, expressed their resistance, expressed their struggle. But the idea was the same. We are all with the people of Gaza. We are in solidarity, and their pain is our pain, and their fight is our fight. We are all part of this resistance against occupation, and this war on Gaza showed us as Palestinians that resisting occupation is the way to go, and that there is no other way but to resist this occupation, which really aims to annihilate us. And therefore we are all for one and one for all.
Dr. Rana Nashashibi, thank you so much. So there you have it, Ayman, Palestinians across the divide, and despite all those circumstances, feeling as one. Interesting note I want to conclude by is that the latest opinion polls show that Palestinians in Gaza even believe their first priority should be national unity, and that the confidence they have in political leaders, regardless of what faction they belong to, is at an all-time low. They really have lost confidence in politics, and they're resorting back to that national sentiment that has united them. Ayman?
Well, thank you very much there, Noor Ode in the occupied West Bank. Well, as we've been reporting, more than 1,300 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed in the 22-day Israeli war here. But since the second Intifada began, more than 3,000 Palestinians have been killed. Our correspondent, Mike Hirsch, visited the family who lost their son on the very first day of Israel's unilateral ceasefire.
Many Palestinian families whose homes have been destroyed say the war is not over. The Abu Jayla family says it won't be over until they avenge the death of their son Maher, who they say was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers on January 18th, the first day of a ceasefire.
I love peace. I love peace. We would like to live with the Israelis, but the Israelis don't want to live together.
It's very difficult for people to get out to farm now.
Maher's father says his son was checking up on the family's small farm in a nearby village along the Israeli border when withdrawing Israeli soldiers shot him in the hand and the chest.
Many families in this eastern part of Han Yunis province feed themselves by what they grow on these farms. But since Maher's death, fewer people are venturing out to tend to their crops for fear of being shot by Israeli soldiers.
The family has visitors coming for tea as they continue to mourn their son's death, discussing war with the Israelis in the present tense, as if it's not over and perhaps may never end.
When the Israeli soldier kill innocent people, this make a huge hate to Israel. They love blood, they love killing, they love destroying.
Also destroyed, the family says, is trust in anything being achieved by the separate Israeli and Hamas ceasefires, and trust that there will be lasting peace for generations to come. Mike Hirsch, Al Jazeera, Gaza.
Well, there's no doubt that Israel's war on Gaza has touched people all around the world. And here at Al Jazeera, we want to hear from you, our viewers. And so here's what you can do. You can go to aljazeera.net/English. Check out our website there. Click on your views banner to send us your thoughts. You'll also find war diaries, video maps, and all sorts of information about the war. We're taking a short break now. We'll have more on Gaza in ruins when we return. But for now, we will leave you once again with some of the images of devastation brought about as a direct of Israel's war.